Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just been to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Not Deadpool versus Wolverine, as I kept calling it. It's Deadpool and Wolverine. And indeed, there is a lot of them being versus each other, but of course, they team up.
Of course.
So, we had a very bad time with Deadpool 2, and there isn't a podcast on it, because it put us in such a bad mood that either we gave up recording it halfway through, or I gave up editing it halfway through, and I went, we can't possibly put this out. We just didn't. So all I did was put out a tweet saying, this is what happened. The film put us in such a bad mood, the podcast was toxic. This, I think, we will be able to put out a podcast on, because I had much better time. How about you?
Well, I was tempted to walk out halfway through, but,
Really?
we had agreed to, well, it was mainly me, because I thought, we've covered so many Marvel films and so many superhero films, we should really do this one. However bad it is, it might make for an interesting conversation, and so on. But really, and then I thought maybe I'm in a bad mood because people in the audience were laughing, right? So, kind of other people were enjoying the film, but I really wasn't. I don't like the tone. I don't like the smarminess of it. There's a lot of in-jokes that I suppose cater to fans of of Marvel, or people in the show business know a lot of in-jokes about 20th Century Fox buying Disney and the function of extras and day players, and some of them was funny. I mean, I also laughed a few times, but yeah.
So, if you're not aware of Deadpool, Deadpool is the fourth wall breaking meta guy in the Marvel universe. Marvel takes itself essentially very seriously. I mean, they're comedy actions and everything, but they want you to buy into the reality of everything. And Deadpool's the guy who shows up and he says, this is all fake. And as you say, talks about the business behind it and says, this is why we can get this character. This is why, in this film, Chris Evans is in it for a bit. And then he goes because he was blowing the budget, makes a joke about that kind of thing. I found that very smarmy before in the past as well. And I didn't really like, well, I certainly didn't like the second film. I don't think I liked the first one very much either. And watching this, I kind of think that the reason I had a better time here, or one of the things that enabled me to have a better time here, is that Marvel is kind of limping along these days. Because last time it was 2018 when Deadpool 2 came out, which is, it came out like either just before Infinity War or in between Infinity War and Endgame. So Marvel is like at its peak, it's building up to the biggest fucking thing, the crossover to end all crossovers. And since Endgame came out and the big 10-year long story that it'd been telling came to a head, it's had a very hard time getting people to retain interest in the story it's going to be telling next, And so when Deadpool is telling all his jokes about, well, you've come into so Wolverine shows up in this. It's Hugh Jackman's back. And they're talking about, his entry into the MCU, because obviously he was huge in X-Men, but that was never part of the MCU, and the business deal, blah, blah, blah. The X-Men can kind of become involved in the MCU these days. And he has a joke about, you've come into the MCU at a very bad time, something like that, And it landed. It really landed, because everyone kind of agrees with that, right?
Yes.
The
film exemplifies, for me, all that went wrong with it, right? So this is a film that, to me, is making sense by, cross-referencing multiple timelines, multiple actors, multiple superheroes. And I think, in order to get the joke, you do need to, know who these people are, really.
Of course you do, yeah.
Yeah. So it requires a lot of...
It's not a film that's open to newcomers. It's absolutely you know these people, and you implicitly know their powers and their histories and their backstories and all those things. So yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot in this that because I've seen a lot of the Marvel films, but when they talk about the particular villain that they're going to face, or one of the villains is that giant kind of purple cloud monster. And Deadpool says he's from Loki season 1 episode 5. It's like, well, I didn't fucking watch Loki. It doesn't matter very much, but people will recognise that, and good for them. But I think when Marvel was at its biggest and it seemed absolutely impenetrable and like this is going to kill cinema forever, then that kind of smarminess did rankle. And now that, you know, it seems kind of much more vulnerable, I kind of didn't mind it. And I also think, you know, you and I really go back and forth, and I don't mean with each other, but just generally, we have gone back and forth on Ryan Reynolds so much. There are times when we like him, and there are times when we don't, and find him unbearably smug and all that kind of stuff. And like his shtick really needs to stop.
It's become his persona. He does it in other films as well.
Yeah, exactly. But there are times when it's like, so Sean Levy, who directed this, also directed Free Guy, which we saw on the podcast, and we rather liked that, and we liked him in that, and the shtick isn't so different.
No, it's true.
We also hated him in the Fast and Furious spin-off,
that's right.
which he shows up for a scene and is awful. So, you know, again, you're thinking, how am I going to take this? I think he basically kind of works here. It's slightly over. Actually, the thing I disliked most about him was the nice pool character, because there are lots of Deadpool versions that you meet, and that one I thought is a bit much.
Well, I think one of the things that rankles me is the gay jokes, right? Which, you know, I initially found kind of funny. I mean, Deadpool is meant to be bisexual or whatever, right? But this is a film that disavows all of that. Like, yeah, he's always interested in a girl, and so on. And nonetheless, kind of, you know, tries to make a lot of jokes out of campiness, but in a way that kind of seems external, that doesn't inhabit camp, that just kind of, you know, deploys it in an outsidery way as a joke. It never bothered me before with Reynolds and this character, but it did this time,
So
there's too much grabbing asses, kind of. And actually, it's always with men. Yeah, you don't see the same kind of jokiness with women.
Absolutely. Well, that's why it's funny, of course, because gayness is funny. I mean, I do agree with you. Like, the one of the problems that I previously had with the character, and I really remember hating this from the second film, was how puerile it is. And there is a lot of puerility here, but it feels like less. And I'm mostly kind of okay with it in a general sense, but you're absolutely right. There is a focus on how funny it is to, you know, stand in a gay way, or like have your arse shot at or something. And the thing with the Deadpool character being bisexual, I think he's supposed to be pansexual, and that's never manifest. One of the criticisms that other people have made about the previous films, I don't know about this film, is that it doesn't come across as pansexuality. It comes across as he's straight, makes gay jokes. And, you know, and in this film, he likes getting his face licked by the world's ugliest dog. So that's kind of, maybe he's getting a sexual through out of that. It's not communicated as such.
The focus is on the woman. His love interest.
Absolutely.
You know, so, which makes all the gay stuff seem like laughing at camp and laughing at gay men. Yeah, the nipple rings, that, you know, the titanium, like, you know, the sex toy stuff. I mean,
it's just constantly something to be made a joke of. I agree.
It begins to not feel very nice, really.
Yeah. I think you'll probably disagree with this. I actually rather like the action in this. I think it maintains a really good level of intensity. I think mostly it's quite witty. You know, when you think about the fight that he has with Wolverine in the car, for example, there's a lot of ideas in that. Single shots where, you know, something happens and they've made good use of the space that they're in, that kind of thing. Mostly, I think, actually, I mean, I've seen better action in other films, and I've seen much, much worse action throughout Marvel. I actually rather liked it.
I mean, I suppose... So I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, I guess I would agree with you, you know, except, you know, for me, great action is like you're thrilled to see it. Like it kind of evokes a physical, you know, sensation. This, at no time did it do that to me, really. It just kind of, well, like it didn't feel as bad as, you know, some of the other you've seen, but it didn't thrill me. What I did like very much, actually, was the look of the film.
Yeah.
You know, yes. I mean, there were kind of, you know, some of the close-ups and the way that it was lit and the color palette. Yeah, I liked it.
It plays very heavily on the red of Deadpool's suit and the yellow of Wolverine's.
Yes, it does.
And
so I liked that very much. I liked a lot of the performers, actually. And, you know, I guess, I don't know if I'm getting old or something, but I do get a bit of a thrill out of seeing, you know, Jennifer Garner come back as Elektra. I had a moment when I saw Wesley Snipes, because I love Wesley Snipes and I haven't seen him in a film in like 20 years practically, right? So, you know, it took me a long time to recognize what's his name now?
Channing Tatum.
Yes.
as Gambit.
Yes.
I believe it was Gambit.
Yeah. It took me a long time to recognize, and I kind of liked him in that, actually, doing the accent and so on. He was funny.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Well, he got a great big laugh when he'd been talking for quite a while, and then Ryan Reynolds goes, wait, I've just got to address this accent thing. It's terrible. That was a good laugh.
Yeah. So it had its moments, and I liked Michael Macfadyen
as the kind of villain. The TVA.
Yeah, I think he really got into it, and he gave it his all, and actually, I thought he's much more skilled than many of the other actors at that farcical, stylized playing.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know? So I think he did that very well, and I appreciated him doing it. But I found it so tiresome.
So we should sort of maybe just say what it's about, generally
Sure.
speaking, why Wolverine is back. So Deadpool has been told by Matthew Macfadyen's character at the TVA, which is the Time Variance Authority, I think, which is basically a kind of Marvel headquarters sort of thing. It's very, very self-referential, and essentially what he's saying is your timeline's coming to an end. It's like it's unraveling because your key player in your timeline is no longer there, and your key player isn't you. I think it's the anchor, they call it. Yeah. The anchor was Wolverine, and Wolverine's dead. We saw that happen in Logan, and the film's making constant reference to the death in Logan. And so, in an attempt to save his universe, his timeline, Deadpool goes looking for another Wolverine from another timeline, and you go through a montage where he meets loads of variations on and so on. He eventually comes across one who is essentially a normal Wolverine, except this Wolverine, it turns out, let down his entire timeline. He's hated in his universe because he didn't save the X-Men when he could. All the X-Men died, and then he went on a murderous killing spree, killing everyone in the world, and bringing shame upon the X-Men name. And so, he's got his thing of, I've got, well, it takes him a while to realise it, of course, but, I need to fight for something, I need to prove myself, and so on. And Deadpool is trying to replace his lack of Wolverine with this other one. And where they end up, this is where I thought, this is kind of interesting. Where they end up is in this place called the Void. They're sent there by Matthew Macfadyen, who can just zap them away because he's kind of in charge of MCU stuff. It's never phrased as such. It's never says I'm in charge, but that's how it plays, right? Like I'm in charge of which characters are important and which ones aren't, sort of thing. And they wind up in this place called the Void, which is where characters go when they're no longer useful. It's a kind of purgatory, it's explained as, and it's like a Mad Max wasteland. It's also explained as. And I thought it's interesting because, it's taken me so long to learn the thing about comic books, which is that anyone can come back at any time. Because if you remember how much I bought into the idea that all those characters were dead at the end of Infinity War. So dumb. But I bought it completely, and it's partly that it was a very dramatic thing to happen, but it's partly that I don't read comics, and it had never sunk into me that this is just a thing.
Alternative timeline.
There will always be a way to come back from this, But it occurred to me, like in between Infinity War and Endgame, all those characters probably wound up here for a bit.
Sure.
It's that kind of place, and that's why we meet Elektra and why we meet Blade. And I think Gambit, the idea of him is he's new, or he's like a version of Gambit who we haven't seen before. Because he says, I was born here. I don't think Channing Tatum's been in a superhero film before.
No, I don't think he's been in a...
But, this is where the old useless,
Yeah, but it's an old comic book. I mean, I remember seeing Gambit in comic books.
Yes, yeah. So this is where the old useless superheroes go. And it's interesting. It plays on that multiverse thrill that we had in the Spider-Man film, where the two previous Spider-Mans came back, and people cheered, and of course no one's cheering when they see Elektra and Blade, but they go, "Ooh, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that."
I mean, the film isn't conducive to cheering, but seeing them kind of gave me a little bit of a happy jolt.
Yeah, and so ultimately, this kind of all of that self-referential stuff, and all of that idea that everybody knows with Marvel that there are these kind of higher level business decisions than the films are making. The films are just telling the stories that they're able to with the characters that have got contracts, and so recently it's been announced that Robert Downey Jr. will be returning as whatever the villain is. He's not coming back as Iron Man, but there's a whole thing about how people don't take these just as characters, but they take them as the actors that represent them, and we understand, the contract's been signed, therefore this can happen. There's a level on which people understand the way in which these films are made that is different to it's interesting.
It's how the the economics play into the narrative.
Yeah, and it's understood by fans.
Yeah.
And and fans read about the news, and it's like your football team signing a new player. It's like the Marvel universe has re-signed Robert Downey Jr. And these films operate on that level. And I think where it's at its most successful, a lot of it, or at least where a lot of the jokes are at their most successful, is when it's operating in that kind of realm. Because a lot of that stuff, it occurred to me, essentially comes across as like the way Marvel fans speak to each other. They talk to each other about the business and about the characters and about the actors and about what all this means. And the film is doing that too. The film is not... I mean, I know it's like its shtick to be all meta, but I find that it really works. Like,
well, I think, what works when it does work. So you were talking about how, what you didn't like was that some of the humor was so puerile. But actually, I thought one of the ways that it also works is that it not always, but at moments, the Deadpool thing is also very intelligent. Yeah, and it's treated the audience members as intelligent. Yeah, it's kind of, referencing all of those things. And I think one of the ways that the film fails for me is that it tries to have it both ways. So, in order to have that kind of farcical, hugely stylized style, you have to appeal to people's knowledges, and you have to treat them as kind of intelligent, right? And knowledgeable. Yeah. So, and on one level, the film does, and then on another level, it descends to this corny motifs of the group and your world being 9 people and the rest. It gets incredibly sentimental.
It still tries to tell you a quote-unquote real story. Go take you on an emotional journey with Deadpool that he genuinely has to do this.
And the emotional journey is dumb.
Sure, yeah.
So I think...
But it is doing both, you're right. Like, if the film will discard all of its meta-commentary when it wants to try and get you to buy into the character and story. And you're right, it's having its cake and eating it.
Yeah, and I thought it did... Yeah, it didn't work, really.
It also reminded me of John Baudrillard when he was asked about The Matrix. Because The Matrix was, like, inspired to some degree by his work. And he talked about how much he hated it. And how it showed that kind of hyper-capitalism can assimilate any commentary, even of itself. It can and turn it to its benefit. You can't. It's unbeatable in that way. Yeah. And this really reminds me of that in the sense that, Barbie did this a little bit as well, where you can make all these jokes about the product and about the business decisions that go into it, and about the thing about this character's costing us too much money. We'll never get the good character because we can't afford it. That kind of thing. And the whole thing about Marvel's on its last legs at the minute. Like, those jokes can make their way into here because Marvel is still kind of confident enough. Like, those jokes Marvel isn't afraid of making about itself because it's strong enough to withstand them. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean, but I think there's something else about because I loved comic books as a kid, and I'm still in them, and I was watching the Robert Pattinson Batman kind of on TV the other day, and and I find that for me the meaning of those things was that they were beautiful. They were beautiful, and they had depth, and they told you something about the world and the conditions of living and what it is to be human, and and offered dream possibilities of what that could be versus what that is. I don't think any of that in relation to this Deadpool and Wolverine film. I think it's a completely commercial job. It's kind of the fact that you make about being in it because Marvel just offered you bags and bags of money, it doesn't make it any less true or or any less significant. I mean, I think that there's no attempt in this film to honestly convey something that is beautiful, or to show some understanding, or to truly move the audience, through a kind of, an awakening of the senses, or perception, or understanding, right? Which is, I think, what art aims to do, right? So, not that we began talking about the film in that way, but I just think it's important to kind of, point it out, because I think, part of the initial joy or pleasure in these superhero films is that they could do that. right? And the reason why people are so passionate about some of them is, whether we agree or not, is because they see the films as doing that, right? I mean, I think a lot of the fandom of things like Star Wars and the Batman films and so on is people see that, right? So I think there's something dispiriting and sad and, I don't know, about a film not even attempting it, which I think this film doesn't even do, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a very throwaway thing, but I did not hate it, and I really expected to at least dislike it, and I kind of didn't do that either. But I took it on its own terms. I think it mostly gets away with the kind of things it's doing. But yeah, it's a trifle.
Yeah, I think the audience laughed. I laughed. I mean, this film makes 90 jokes a second, and one or two land, right? But I do also think that there's something kind of tired about it, and tiring for me. Actually, one of the moments that I like most, how bad I am about, as soon as the credits starts, I run from the cinema, right? I mean, I was trained to stay, but that was before you could get the credits on IMDb, right? Like now, I'm not going to, waste 15 minutes of my time watching these endless credits. And so, so sometimes I miss the Easter eggs, right? And so when I caught this, and usually I don't mind missing the Easter eggs either, but this one, I found it arresting, because it's almost like, I don't know, outtakes of all the characters that you see in this film, but in their earlier incarnations, right?
Yeah, it's behind the scenes footage from X-Men and Fantastic Four and
all of them.
Previous Deadpool.
Electra, all of them. And of course, what you realize is how young everyone was.
Yeah.
Like, you see Hugh Jackman in his first film, his first X-Men film. What is that?
2000.
Yeah, so 25 years ago, a quarter of a century ago. And he looks so beautiful, really.
And so unbuilt, relatively. I mean, the body standards have changed enormously.
So much, yeah. And actually there's something about seeing them that way, right, which, they're young and they're beautiful, and they're also, it's like their first chance, or, that made this film, or not just this film, but actually I think this whole type of film kind of seem such a dispiriting and cynical exercise.
I wondered how you'd take that, because I saw you stopped and saw it, because I thought you would find that the most manipulative, sappy. We love our people. Like, remember the end of, well, you didn't stick around for it, but I showed you afterwards the end of Endgame, and it was the end of our big story, and they had all the main characters signing their names on screen, their signatures coming up, signing their characters, and fucking hell, this is ridiculous. We love them so much, and I thought you'd find it like that, especially because it's playing fucking Green Day, Good Riddance over the top, which is like the song you use to manipulate people into feeling sad and nostalgic.
Sure.
Well,
I mean, I
because
suppose,
that's kind of how I saw it. Like,
yeah. No, I mean, I think I wasn't paying that much attention. I just saw it as a kind of, as a way of dressing up the credits by showing outtakes, by also kind of, bringing the other films back in relation to this one in a different way. Yeah, because that's what the whole film had been doing throughout. But, what I responded to, I suppose, was the youth.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's massively at odds tonally with the rest of it.
Exactly.
Because when it's bringing back those other films and referencing all those older films in the main body of the film, it's sarcastic and it's funny, and these are the useless characters and all that kind of stuff. And here it's sentimental, and that is definitely how it plays. It doesn't play as a Deadpool joke.
No. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to that. I mean, I was, because I was walking out, and really what stopped me was seeing Hugh Jackman in his first film, I think it was, being so young. That's kind of what stopped me. And then kind of, I stayed to see kind of the rest of them. And, it was just people applauding Magneto's last scene in the film or whatever, right? Like, it is those on-set outtakes. But the only reason why I say to watch it was because I think there's something very tired about this film, and it includes the characters. I mean, kind of Ryan Reynolds in his leading man days, most beautiful men alive, and that is what kept him as a leading man. And here you have a whole film in which you never once see him with his proper face. Yeah, he's kind of under a ton of makeup, which, he looks like he's had cancer for the last 20 years. It's all kind of dotted with...
The burn victim stuff.
Yeah.
Or he's behind the mask. Although you do see him as Nice Pool.
You do see him as Nice Pool, but again, to be made fun of, for clearly being gay or...
Just too nice.
With the hair and so on. So, there's something almost, I don't know, perverse about kind of having Ryan Reynolds in a film and not showing him looking good once, which then you see in those outtakes, kind of the way that he appeared in those first films. Yeah, and of course he's incredibly beautiful, well, as they all are, right? So there is something about the film that plays like one of those expendable films with Sylvester Stallone. Expendable. And Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting in the jungle at 85.
Yeah, sure.
So,
I mean, you're right certainly about Hugh Jackman, because must be in his mid-50s at this point, and he looks it. I mean, that's the other thing, historically about comic book characters is
they don't age.
They don't age, or they don't have to. They can if the comic book wants them to. But actors, you can't stop them from aging, no matter how much you try and how much CGI you put on their faces. And Hugh Jackman looks very much older than he did, and that's why you had a film like Logan, where it was about him aging. Like okay, let's do something with this. But it's a fundamental sort of issue with this that these actors age and go, and that's why it seems so desperate actually to bring back Robert Downey Jr., although they're not bringing him back as Iron Man. But Iron Man seemed like done, right? And he was a lot older now than he was, and it was time to end it. And but they can't say no to more Robert Downey Jr. They need him back, because he's so important. What will they do when he's 90? They make jokes about this, about how Hugh Jackman's going to be forced to do this till he's 90 years old. Well, eventually he will die, and they won't be able to do it again.
I think one aspect also that I didn't like, or that left a sour aftertaste, is that you felt that a lot of the actors were auditioning for Marvel. Yeah, so that Channing Tatum was auditioning, and also what's his name, that British actor who was in Mission Impossible and Superman.
God, what's his fucking name? Henry Cavill,
whom I love. But he's doing a Wolverine, right?
Yeah.
So you did feel that a lot of those cameos were kind of auditions,
Maybe.
Because those are all people who'd never done a Marvel film.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't know. I sometimes like the cameo, but cumulatively, I didn't like the idea behind them, and I thought there were too many, really.
No, but all of that played quite well with me, I must say. I did enjoy that stuff, and I took it essentially at face value. He's there to make a joke about himself and about the idea of him being a Wolverine, and then when he gets his claws out, he does the reload punch thing that he did from Mission Impossible. So the kind of no joke. So that's how I took it. You may be right that they also play to some extent.
I think we could both be right, because like you, I enjoyed it. But I do also think that there's something behind that, right? Sure. So anyway, a mixed experience. To be honest, I thought it ended up being better than I expected it to, because I think from what you said, I thought it would be like a terrible disaster, and certainly,
I just thought it would be all too much. All of that shit would just be all too much. But on this occasion, for the reasons that I've stated about the position of Marvel these days and so on, it did work for me.
Well, I'm glad, because I think, you were much more resistant to seeing it than I was. So, and then you ended up liking it a little bit more than I did. Yeah, so that worked out nice.
Yeah. The one other thing I would say is actually I really liked how graphic it was, violently, that is.
Yes.
It essentially becomes cartoon violence very quickly, and that's what you realise. So that these characters, Deadpool and Wolverine, can regenerate. And the film doesn't even go into, it takes a while for them to regenerate, which other films do that sort of thing of like, oh, this is going to take a while to get over. But they can stab each other so much and in all these different ways, and it's absolutely fine. They're going to come back from it. So, which is why when they're fighting, there's really no stakes to it, but it's just about them getting out their aggression or having the spat that they're having. But they can be as violent as they like with each other, and I really enjoyed it. I thought, wow. And actually, the point in the big fight with all the 100,000 Deadpools, where Nicepool gets his head exploded, the guys next to us went, ooh, it really worked on them, that bit, and I thought that's great, because it was cartoony, it was very gory, and the film, you can see why it's got a 15 rating. I think it's more the language than the violence, to be fair, because it is very cartoony, but no, I'm enjoying this. It's the reckless abandon with the violence, because anyone can come back from this within a second.
Well, I mean, for me it was very different. I mean, the first hour I thought, oh God, we've made such a mistake. I'd like to go, and then I thought, well, you can't go. It's primarily your idea, and then actually, I think the second half, I enjoyed it more.
Yeah, good. And actually, one last word I want to talk about. Just mention how much I liked the actor who played the villain, Emma Corrin. She was Diana in The Crown.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know that. What's the name of the character? It's Cassandra Nova.
It's Professor Xavier's twin sister.
Yeah, who I don't think has ever been mentioned before.
No.
Or some reference would have been made to where she was mentioned before. But apparently she was in the womb, she tried to kill Professor X. Yeah. So she's bad news. But she's got a really interesting kind of threatening presence in this, because she is very small, very slight. She's a woman. But yet she's incredibly powerful. She runs this underworld.
Yes, and you believe her running.
And I love the visual effect that's used of her getting into people's minds, because Professor X can do it just by looking at them, but she needs to touch them. Yeah. She puts her hand into their skulls and moves it round, and you can see it. It's rather like if you remember The Mummy of the Brendan Fraser film, where Omar Jalili's character gets the scarabs under his skin. You can see it all coming up and climbing up his head. It's really creepy. Great. This has that, and she's moving her hand around, and it looks fantastic. She not only does she do it under the skin, but she has her fingers poke out. She grabs people by the head through their heads. It's a really cool, really creepy, tactile effect, and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I enjoyed that too.
So she's decent. And
the effects and the look, because I like these films to be glossy. Yeah, and this had that glossiness of look, and the effects were great. I just couldn't.
It's been very successful. It cost $200 million and it's made close to $1 billion at this point.
Already? My God!
So it's been out.
I thought it was a big flop.
No, it's been out since July 26th in the States.
Right. Well, that surprises me, really.
I must say, it doesn't enormously surprise me. I hadn't really heard anything about what people's responses to it would be. But it doesn't surprise me it would have decent word of mouth.
Oh.
I think it's quite good fun. And that's essentially what people will come out telling each other about it.
Right. Well, you're clearly right. But it surprises me.
So there you go. I think it's kind of worth seeing.
Yes.
And it might even be worth seeing on a big screen.
Well, if you're going to see it at all, you should definitely see it on a big screen. Whether you should see it at all is another question.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.